My guest today is Peter Sanders. If you haven't heard that name or you don't know who he is, I almost guarantee you that you have seen his work. Peter is responsible for some of the most iconic images to come out of the Muslim world, whether they be images of the Kaaba or images of the Hajj or images of famous mashaykh. All of these pictures, of course, linked in the episode notes. You can purchase his books, and I encourage everyone, every Muslim household shall have these books. These are some of the most famous images you have seen, and he is the man responsible for them. However, he has been practicing this craft since the 1960s, and in many ways he's an artist. Even before his journey to Islam, he was very famous for photographing people like Jimi Hendrix, Bob Dylan, The Doors, the Rolling Stones. So a large part of what you're about to hear is a little bit of a tour through the rock and roll world of the 1960s and 1970s. So if you get a little bit lost, make sure to check out the episode notes. I try to document all of the people that he's mentioned, all of the bands, if these are things that you haven't heard of before. This is a tremendous conversation for me. As a matter of fact, when I reached out to him, he was a little hesitant because he's like, well, I'm not a scholar. And he thought that I was into this scholarly thing. And the conversation was going to be very ilmi and very academic. I said, no, I want to learn from you, what it's like to be an artist, what is it like to practice a craft, and we get into a lot of that. His insights are phenomenal, they're fantastic. I am so honored that he graced me with his time and with his presence. He's such a gentle soul, a sweet human being. I'm so happy to present this very intense conversation with you. Without further ado, please enjoy this conversation with none other than Peter Sanders. Assalamu alaikum, Sidi, and welcome to the show.
Alaikum salam. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a great honor for me because your pictures have been a part of my life before I even knew that they were your pictures. These images, mashallah, some of the iconic images, particularly of the Kaaba, which we'll get to, and most especially of Sheikh Muhammad ibn Habib, rahimahullah, which definitely I think we get to. Those images have been on my desktop in a picture folder, ever since I've had a laptop. And it's a great honor for me to actually, to sit down with you and to discuss some of this. So I have some questions written as sort of guidance.
Okay.
But we don't have to follow that, of course. We'll see where the conversation takes us. But one thing I really do want to hear your thoughts on is I really want to understand from you the early 1970s. In many of your interviews that I've in preparing for this conversation, you've talked about how you went to India for some time, and I know from other icons like in America, people like Steve Jobs, they were always into India, and it was a big fad. And I want to know what was happening that caused a lot of these Westerners to want to go look into the East, and what was that experience like for you before we get to the Islam part?
Yeah. Well, I've been you get to a certain point in life where you try to make sense of everything that's happened, and I was forced to do that last year because the Turks came to me and said they wanted to do an exhibition in Taksim Square in Istanbul. So I said, okay, what do you want to do in the shade of the tree, or Muslims in China? They said, no, we want to do a retrospective. And I said, but a retrospective includes all my music stuff from the 60s and my spiritual search through India. They said, yeah, that's what we want to do. So I had to put together a kind of exhibition that kind of made sense, linking all these things together. So it was quite an interesting project for me to do. I think the way I make sense of it is that, I grew up in the 50s and the 60s, and the 50s and 60s, UK was recovering from World War II. And there was kind of a fog around, a gray fog over the country, and there was a lot of anxiety and fear. Was there going to be a World War III and all this kind of stuff? And within that context came the kind of hippie peace movement, peace and love and kind of color and music and art and all this stuff. And it was like a counter reaction to what was happening in the country. And then there also was a kind of it was a kind of trying to shake off of a very materialistic kind of attitude that was settling in. So I was part of that cultural revolution, which is when I started taking pictures. And so I started taking pictures from about the mid-60s up. Well, I've carried on, but you know, I got to the end of the 60s, and I'd become kind of interested in spiritual things. I wasn't really looking for a religion. I was looking for some spiritual answers to my own personal problems and issues. And you know, it was very fashionable in those days. The Beatles went to India, and so I started thinking about India. But the thought of India came after I was introduced to a book called The Autobiography of a Yogi, which is Steve Jobs' book. And in fact, it was distributed at his funeral. You know, that's how much he liked it. And I read that book, and it just made a lot of sense to me. And I started meditating. You know, I was in a correspondence course with Yogananda's ashram in I think it was in California. I mean, he had one in India, but he'd set up one in California. And so, you know, I began this course to start meditating, and within a very short time, things started happening. And I realized after, you know, having read Yogananda's book, that I needed a teacher. So that was really what sent me off to India, was really a search to find a teacher. And of course, in India, I was exposed to all the different kind of religions, not just Hinduism, but Buddhism and Sikhism, Islam, you know. And so I kind of had a crash course in all the religions while I was traveling around India on my quest and taking pictures. And so that's, you know, and I was in India for about 7 months. And of course, I had some connection with Islam, not a lot, but one of the places I was staying, there was a mosque nearby. And then when I used to get up to meditate, I'd hear the adhan from the nearby mosque. So, and there were, you know, there's one story that I like to relate, because it just shows how God in his wisdom just gives us the signs we need. So I was on a station very early in the morning, and I don't know if you've ever been to India, but it seems the whole nation is on the move, you know. And I was on this station, it was very crowded, there was loads of people with luggage, and suddenly within all this kind of apparent chaos, I saw an old lady roll out a prayer mat and do the prayer. And it was like God showed me this stillness within all this kind of movement. And I'd never seen it before. I didn't know what it was. And I went over there, and there was a young man there, and I said, what's this lady doing? And he said, oh, it's my grandmother, she's a Muslim, she's doing the prayer. So I was kind of shown in a snapshot what the prayer was. And I didn't think a lot about it at the time, but it kind of went in, you know, this visual image. And so all these things happen, and then they all kind of make sense at some point. So that was really India. And then I came back to the UK after being there for about 7 months. And some people I knew before had become Muslim, musician friends of mine had become Muslim. And then other friends I knew had got into kind of weird stuff, you know, drugs and magic and all this kind of stuff. So I was being shown very clearly what direction I needed to go in.
Were you in India alone, or was it a group of friends?
Yes, I went with a couple of friends who were going to visit their Sikh master in northern India. And I went to see him just in case he was the teacher I was looking for. But I liked him and I respected him, but I knew he wasn't the person I'd come to see. So then I went off on my own and carried on my journey.
So by a series of, you know, subhanAllah, how Allah works, you know, a series of circumstances, my understanding is that you're introduced to this idea of tasawwuf, you know,
Yes.
part of this big house of Islam and the heart of this house. And then it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, very shortly thereafter, you end up in Morocco.
Yeah,
and
3 weeks.
Muhammad ibn Habib, like almost right away.
3 weeks after saying the Shahada, I went
Wow.
just before Ramadan. 3 weeks before Ramadan, I said the Shahada, and 3 weeks later, I was in Mecca meeting Sidi Imam Habib. Yeah.
So I mean, I think it's. I would really. I want to get into this. If you can, sometimes it's hard to articulate. But what was that meeting like? You know, it's very rare. Well, I don't say it's rare, but it's hard for people that are not familiar to
Yes.
understand that kind of impact. You know, to meet somebody of that magnitude, of that depth. You know, somebody who you see and reads you right away. You know, they know everything about you before you even say anything. I mean, what was that? And only three weeks after saying your shahada, this is like a crash course.
Yeah, but you have to remember, I was in India, and I was looking for a teacher, and I ended up with a teacher. But I met gurus and saints and all kinds of people. But all that didn't really prepare me for the meeting with Sidi Imam Habib, because people spoke about him as insan al-kamil, the perfect human being. And I remember when I put my first foot on the steps up to his room, that I realized I wasn't prepared for this meeting, and I didn't know what to expect. And also I'd been asked to take pictures of him at the same time. So I was meeting him and had to take pictures of him, because someone asked me if I would take pictures, and they must have agreed it with him, because I think he was kind of ready for me to do it. So, and it's kind of funny, Haroon and I often talk about, when we were doing the campaign for the meetings with mountains, and, he said, in a windowless room, I had this meeting, and I had not been back to that room since 1970, 71. When I went in there, the whole room was, it was longer than I ever expected. It was a long, thin room, and that's not how I remembered it in my mind at all. And it was covered, whole one wall, in fact, two walls were windows. So why did I think it was a windowless room? And I've thought about it so much, because I didn't use a flash when I took the picture. And all I can think was, because it was in Morocco, it's probably very bright, that room is high up. He probably had curtains drawn across those windows. And maybe there was one window at the end, which is where the light came onto him. That's the only way I can explain it, because I have no memory of that room other than just him sitting in that four-poster bed. And it's kind of interesting what the mind, in a certain situation, what the mind takes in and what it doesn't notice,
Well, it's almost like, maybe we could even say it's sort of the self-projection. When I met my sheikh for the first time, it was a summer, and I was so overwhelmed, like you are describing. I was so overwhelmed. It was a Friday. I actually walked out of the mosque with him, and I forgot my sandals in the mosque. And I started walking out on the scorching street of Cairo barefoot. And I was so overwhelmed, I didn't realize it. And the sheikh's like, "Oh, come with me. We'll go have lunch." And I was like, "What is that feeling?" And I looked down and went, "Oh my God." And I said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so embarrassed." And then he looked at everyone. He laughed. He was like, "Oh, he came to us from America barefoot." But for me, that was true. I was really barefoot. I was just so in an impoverished state. And I think that I was just projecting that. And sometimes maybe it was windowless from that point of view.
Yeah, anyway, it's very interesting. And I think about that meeting a lot, because I had no idea who he was. And I think as you get older, you have a kind of inkling, but you still don't know the vastness of that being that, we met. And it was a very powerful experience.
How much time did you spend with him in that initial trip?
So I ended up, spending the whole of Ramadan in that Zawiya. And that was tough for me. It wasn't a comfortable situation, It was autumn in Morocco. It was a very bare, stark zawiya. But so I was there, and I didn't speak Arabic, and he was coming down every day giving these famous discourses that he gave, commentary on the Quran. And he was 100. Some say he was 100 years of old, and it was very powerful, because even though I didn't know what he was saying, I could tell it was very, very powerful experience. And the place would be packed with Moroccans. They would just come in and fill the Zawiya up. And he would give these talks, and he would have Sidi Hamid, his Quran reciter, sitting next to him. And so he'd say, Zeet, and he'd recite this line from the Quran, and then he'd give the tafsir. And sometimes people would just pass out. You'd hear someone shout, Allahu Akbar, and they'd actually fall unconscious. I mean, it was just the things he was talking about. Even though I didn't know what he was saying, I could just tell it was a very, very powerful experience. Yeah.
This is the Zawiya where he's currently buried, correct?
Yeah, it's in Mecca. Yeah.
Okay, so I've actually been blessed. I visited that once. I did not go upstairs. I think at the time his wife was still living there. But yeah, that's a small remote place. I mean, to spend the whole month there.
Yeah, and it was, and I never went out. I never went out to the market or anything. The only time I ever left, if there wasn't enough food in the Zawiya, then one of his fuqara would come and invite us to go and break the fast with him. So I was in there that whole month. And then on the Eid day, all the fuqara suddenly appeared all in white, and they had these bowls of white milky rice, smelling of rose water, and doing the Eid dhikr and everything. And then after we did the prayer and everything, I went out, and there's a garden, the garden at the back of where the Zawiya is. I went into that garden, and it was like, I remember it so strongly. The sky was so blue, and the green and the colors. It was just like that whole month locked in that place was just really preparing me for the day of the Eid. Yeah, so that whole time. And then he used to come down sometimes. There was a few of us in the Zawiya, and he used to come down. And I remember I could always feel him before he came into the room. I'd feel his presence. It was just incredible. Yeah.
Any personal anecdotes you feel comfortable sharing that happened between you and him, or things that you've seen in your time?
Not a lot, because I couldn't really converse with him, so I was just in that kind of bubble and seeing him and watching how, I remember we'd be sitting downstairs, and then suddenly fuqara would like appear, and they'd come like from the desert or something, and then they'd be sitting there with us, and then suddenly a message would come, they'd go up and see the sheikh. And I was sitting there, how does the sheikh know they're here? And, like, how does this thing operate, It was just, I was just sitting watching it all going on, And then it was all these amazing, for me, because I don't know if you've seen Meeting Through Mountains, but there's him, and then there's all the people that were around him, the really poor, miskin fuqara, and then there were other, other people that had money and stuff. So it was a very wide range of different people who were his, followers, and I see all these different kinds of people, and it was very interesting for me to see the whole picture, which must have been something like what it was like in Medina, because the Sahaba were very varied. Some were very poor, some were very rich, and it was just, I think, encapsulated that whole picture.
Actually, I'm glad you said that. One of the things that my teachers always say is whenever we're in a gathering or with students, they would always impress upon us, this is how Islam was passed. This is what it was like that the Sahaba were with the Prophet, peace be upon him. And it's not just the things that are said, but if you spend a lot of time with a sheikh, sometimes you end up looking like him, dressing like him, talking like him, mannerisms, things like that. And my sheikh told me one time, he said, that's a sign that this isnad, that these chains of transmission are true. That's what's being transmitted. You're not just getting the book stuff. I mean, anybody can pick up a book and read it, but you're getting that stuff that's on the inside. It's being passed. And I wish I had the words to articulate it, to describe it sometimes, which is why I'm so happy we're speaking, because I think you've been able to capture some of it with these images. Sometimes it's just words are not enough to describe.
Exactly. Yeah, I've always been a very visual person, and I do kind of struggle with words quite a lot. Sometimes I find them a bit failing in a way, but images have always kind of spoken to me. So I
So,
mean, yeah.
no, please continue.
No, that's just what I'm saying, and so I was just kind of watching what was going on, what was the kind of adapt the behavior of people coming into that situation, and how the whole thing worked, you know. And it was really, I think what you see with someone like that is there is no cult of the personality. I mean, his personality is not there. I mean, you can see who he is, but there isn't a personality, you know. It's kind of been etched away somehow. It's just very transparent, and yeah, it's a very interesting process. And it was hard for me, you know. I just come from India and all of that. I just come from the whole 60s thing, and you know, and suddenly I found myself in a very difficult situation. You know, it was hard for me, the diet, the cold. You know, Morocco in the autumn is not, you know, those buildings are not very warm, so I struggled with cold and all these things. But I think about it now, it was a very blessed time for me, really.
After that, when you returned, were you still involved with the music business and rock and roll?
No, once I kind of had accepted Islam, I was already turning. I mean, India was really me turning my back on it a little bit, because I saw so many people die, you know, in that business, and you know, the kind of effects of fame and how people react to fame and all that kind of stuff. It didn't, you know, I mean, I see it as a kind of, kind of explained it that they were the poets at the time. And when there's a kind of cultural revolution, one tends to look towards the poets to try and make sense of it. But once I started looking at spiritual things, I was really on a different direction. And so I kind of, I mean, I still had friends who were in that world, but I was really, because after that, after India and then going to Morocco, within 3 months, I heard Sinacek was going to go and perform Hajj, and I had no money, but I just thought, if he's going to go and do Hajj, I want to be there when he does Hajj. And I didn't have any money or anything. And then one evening I went to a gathering, and someone came to me and said, "We've got 7 tickets for Hajj and only 6 people," and they gave me a ticket. So I went on Hajj expecting to meet Sidi Imam Habib at the Kaaba, and then some Moroccans came to us and told us that he died on the way, you know. Yeah, and again, it was very interesting. I have to kind of explain something, that when I was in India, and when I first arrived in India, I met a Sikh man, and he said to me, "You know, what are you doing?" And I said, "I've come to India to look for a teacher and everything." And he said, "Oh, interesting." He said, "When you come back, come and visit me." So when I left India after being at the ashram of Sacha Sai Baba for about 6 months, I went and saw this guy, and he said, "You know, how was your trip?" And I said, "Oh, it was amazing. I met this person, he was incredible, you know, he did this and he did that and everything." And the guy looked me straight in the face and he said, "You missed the point. He didn't do anything, it was God doing it." And that would kind of shocked me. And then I realized, yeah, that's the truth. You know, I've kind of projected it all onto this person. So the same thing happened when I went to the Kaaba and I got the message that Sidi Imam Habib had died on the way. It was like, oh yeah, I'm here for God, you know. And it kind of throws you back on yourself a little bit, because it's easy to kind of link onto these people because they're so amazing. But, you know, they're transparent really. And they're saying, it's not me, you know, your journey is towards God, you know. So it kind of, it reminded me again, yeah.
MashaAllah. I mean, especially now, you know, with the culture of images and social media and
Yeah,
popularity and influencers, it's starting to impact that understanding. You know, a lot of young people, they think that the sheikh is supposed to be like a celebrity superstar
yes,
person, which is another problem altogether. I mean, unfortunately, but
yeah.
you know, the sheikh
Well,
never
it's
really.
finding the balance. It's finding the balance, isn't it? Because we love our shaykh, we love the awliya.
Of
What's
course.
not to love about them? But you know, but they're saying it's not us. You know, it's
Yeah.
your direction is, you know, the true ones. They'll just deflect you. You know.
So you answered what was for me a very big conundrum, because I'm trying to get this timeline. I'm like, you know, he becomes Muslim, he meets the sheikh, and then he's in Hajj. Like, how does all that happen in less than
In
1
1 year,
year? So now it makes sense, mashallah.
it's like a
The
crash
famous
course.
picture of the Kaaba, with the contrasting of the two sides, that was from that trip. That was from that Hajj.
No, that was later. So when I was doing Hajj, I wanted obviously to photograph it, and you know, I was a Westerner, and you know, nobody wanted to give me permission. You know, and everyone I asked in Jeddah just said, no, not me, go and ask somebody else. And I spent like 2 weeks going from office to office, trying to find someone that would give me permission to take pictures. And I still remember today, I went into the office of this guy called Suleiman. It was a huge office. And I went in and I said, you know, I want permission to take pictures of the Hajj in Mecca. And he said, no one else will give you permission, but I will give you permission, and I will give you a guard to protect you. And so he did. I got permission, and so I got to photograph the Hajj, and that was in '71. But I remember that time when I entered the Haram, and you go through those arches. I remember the Kaaba filling my vision, and I never knew at that time how to photograph it like that. But when I was working in the Haram in the 90s, when they were extending the Haramain, that's when I did that picture, because that's the idea I came up with, was to fill the whole frame of the image with it. Yeah, because I kept thinking about how can I get it how I saw it the first time. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw the Kaaba. That's also one of those moments very hard to talk about. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not that big of a structure, you know, especially
Yeah.
compared to everything else around it. But for some reason, when you're there, you're like, oh my God, this is it.
Yeah, but you have to remember, I was there in the 70s. In the 70s, everything was still low key. I mean, you still had the Sanan structure.
The Ottoman complex.
Yeah, and so it was quite big. I mean, and I've thought about this a lot since all this development. You know, all these buildings and all this raising up of the Haram, it psychologically makes the Kaaba look smaller. It's the same size it's always been, but psychologically, as a viewer, it makes it look smaller. Which is why Sanan wouldn't make it's why he made the building like he did. He said it's disrespectful to make something higher than it.
Yeah. Now you know, you make tawaf and you're thinking about, oh, maybe afterwards we'll go here to get something to eat, or you know, we'll go there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yeah, it's another problem.
I'm so blessed to have seen it when I did. You know, there was still Bilal's mosque there, you know, and it's just
Wow, mashallah.
yeah.
So my mother's family is Meccan.
Oh, mashallah.
And my mother's family, they used to be responsible for distributing Zamzam to the pilgrims.
Mashallah.
So in my mother's family, I do hear stories that you know, our house used to, you know, open the balcony and the Kaaba is, you know, there. I mean, I don't know how true that is, but you know, there is this sort of oral tradition that, you know, you used to make the sa'i. You know, it's almost like in a marketplace. I mean, they're just everything was right there.
Same as Medina. I mean, the market came right up to the Prophet's mosque. You know,
So
it was much more an integrated part of the you know, the city. Yeah.
So stepping out of Islam slightly, but more into photography, I want to read to you a quote of yours. I hope, and correct me if this is wrong, but this is something that really caught my attention. I think you were commenting on French photographer Cartier-Bresson.
Bresson, yeah.
And then you say, when you begin, the self is very noisy and the mind is always chattering. You must allow the self to calm down to a point where it is just witnessing things, harmonizing yourself to your surroundings.
Yeah.
Now, if I read that quote abstractly, that's almost like a sheikh talking to his murid about how you do dhikr, but this is about you talking about how you do photography. I mean, it's very poetic and spiritual. I really want to unpack this idea of the self and calming yourself to be able to capture an image.
Yeah. Well, I've kind of thought about this a lot, and it's interesting for me that art, a lot of art 250 years, 300 years ago was about glorifying God. And now we find ourselves at a time where a lot of art is about glorifying the artist. It's all about the artist, really. It's but great art comes from a point where the self is transparent, because God, Al-Muzammilu, one of his names, which I often quote in the workshops we do, the perfect creator of the perfect form, and all these words that describe that aspect of God. So I had a very interesting conversation with a scholar once. I said to him, I think all photographers, because when I used to travel, people would say to me, what do you do? And I would say Muzamil, Musawir. Sorry, yeah, not Muzamil, sorry, I mean Musawir. I would say Musawir, but that's not true, actually. I mean, truthfully, you'd say Abdul al-Musawir or something. So I said to him, I think all photographers should be called Abdul al-Musawir. And and his reply was not what I expected at all. And he said, yes, and also the people that look at the pictures could be called Abdul al-Musawir. So it's not just the person who's creating the images, but it's the person who's also looking at them and enjoying them. Because you're enjoying that aspect of God. Which was a really interesting, thing. It was really gave me a lot to think about, actually. So I've always kind of, and having done meditation, you become aware of, that process. The moment you sit down to remember God, then all these thoughts come and you have all these things distracting you. But, the great teachers of this just say, well, it's just like chattering. You just have to let it. It's like clouds passing through you. Just don't attach yourself to it. And the more you just let it drift past and just concentrate on what you're doing. So I've kind of been able to train myself to do that. I had once I was in the Tawaf in Mecca doing pictures of the. I think it was the day they were changing the Kiswa. I think it was the day of Arafat. And my camera jammed. I was on the edge of the Tawaf, and it's very busy in there. And I had to drop to my knees, and it's a very complicated procedure because you have to put a screwdriver in the back of the camera and unlock this spring. And I had to just really focus myself, because if I thought about where I was and worrying about people tripping over me or carrying all this expensive equipment, I just was able to just do it, and that's happened to me a few times, It's funny.
Is it a process? Is it fair to say that art, good art, is really about almost erasing the self, so something else can come through?
I think so. I think so, and I think it's the same with music or any art form. The more that you erase the self, the more pure your art will be. And I mean, there's stories about Zen monks that, meditate for hours and then they pick up the calligraphy pen and just in one stroke or a couple of strokes, they'll do what's a masterpiece, And I think there are musicians in the Arabic world, Muslim world would do dhikr before they start playing samar and things. So I mean, it is a tradition.
I was reading over the Ramadan. I was struggling with trying to how to define art, and I came upon uh, one of the definitions of art is Tolstoy's definition of art, which is to communicate feeling.
Yeah.
And I like that because all the other definitions were too philosophical and too mumbo jumbo. I couldn't get it. But communicate feel, I got that. And then I started thinking, anytime I would hear a lesson, or I would be in the presence of a saintly person, and I really felt something, they would always say, what comes from the heart goes to the heart.
Mm.
And that's sort of why I'm interested in this concept and that quote of yours, because it's I think that we're saying the same thing, but just from two sides.
Exactly. Yeah.
That if you erase the nafs, if you erase yourself, then the truth will just sort of manifest. And when I started thinking about that even more, I was like, well, how would we define the Prophet? Peace be upon him. I mean, that's just pure art.
Yeah.
All of this divine light coming out to people. So I started to think about, can we think about Islam as a system that makes us artists? It produces, it's a form of art itself, the practice of Islam. So I've just been very interested. I don't know where I'm going with these thoughts, but I'm just very interested.
No, I think, I mean, I've often thought about, if you think about the Sahaba, and we can't imagine what they were like, but I imagine, because they were such beautiful people and noble people, that whatever they possessed, even though they probably possessed very little, I'm sure it was beautiful, because they were beautiful. And there is a kind of, I do sense a kind of disconnect. And I see it in our community, we aspire to one thing, but then we live very differently. And really, if we're aspiring to be beautiful inside, then it should be expressed outwardly as well. And I think that, I was going to say one thing, I remember reading an interview with Dylan, and they asked him how, in the 60s, how did you write all these, songs like Masters of War and, Gates of Eden, all these incredible songs. And he said they were just like clouds passing through, and I just grabbed them and poured them down. And it was very much, it didn't come from him. He recognized it was like, there's a kind of inspiration that he was able to sort of tap into. And I think that's the same thing we're talking about. You mean, look at the work of Leonardo da Vinci, or any great master. They tapped into something on a very high level. Sure. So therefore, their self must have been subdued enough to enable that to happen.
So did you find in Tasawwuf that sort of idea? I mean, did it speak to you more because you are an artist and sort of you are always grappling with trying to subdue yourself so that the art can come?
Yeah, I think it made sense to me. I was somebody who kind of worried a lot, not when I was younger, but when as I got older, and kind of, some days I'd be anxious, not really know why I was anxious. So I was keen to kind of calm that down, whatever that was. And I think once you embark on a spiritual journey, you start to learn tips, or you learn from your teachers, tools that you can work against these things that you need to remove, because they can be a problem for you if they're allowed to grow, So I mean, I think the two, Sheikh Hamza said to me one thing some time ago. He said it was a great, I don't know the name of the person, he said it was a great scholar and philosopher who said that whatever you choose to do in life, whether you're a carpenter or a doctor, anything, whatever trade you decide to do, if you do it to the best of your ability, it will become like a spiritual path for you, and you will get to know everything you need to know about yourself. And that always kind of rang true with me, because that's kind of, I was somebody who's not very patient, and I can sit for hours waiting to take a picture, because that's what I'm engaged in, and through that process I'm being taught to be patient. So I think it is with whatever you do, whether you're a writer or anything you're passionate about.
So you became Muslim also at a very interesting time for the Muslim world.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the West, but in the 70s and early 80s, a lot of interesting things were happening in the heartland of the Muslim world.
Yes.
You're sort of reflecting back, what kind of differences do you see between Muslims then, like the 60s, 70s, and Muslims today? I mean, just sort of like a macro kind of commentary.
Yeah. I mean, I did kind of, from becoming a Muslim and going to Morocco and then Saudi Arabia and then traveling, just non-stop traveling. I've been doing a process to kind of do a timeline, and I just got all my old passports out and I just wrote down dates, trips and everything. And it's just like, when I look at it, I'm going, wow, this is ridiculous. I mean, there's trips that I did, I don't even know why I did them, there's just so many. And, but I remember thinking at some point, round about the year 2000, it was like God picked me up in a kind of typhoon and blew me around the world. And I got to sort of document all these sort of societies which are sort of slowly disappearing. I went to Mauritania and Mali and Senegal and Sudan, traveled everywhere in Sudan and everywhere, and I got to see traditional Islam before it completely disappeared. Now it's very hard to find those kind of places now. And I thought, why did that happen? I think I was just like, it was the last chance to capture the kind of embers of what had been there for a very long time. And then, of course, 9/11 happened, and that was a big shift, big gear shift in everything. So it's kind of, I've been very fortunate enough to see all this stuff, and now I'm kind of, maybe it was a kind of slightly romantic. I really wanted to document a kind of more romantic Islam, and that's what more of a spiritual side of it. That's what I was trying to show, really. And I think I was very fortunate to go and have access to all the places that I did, But it's a different picture now.
That's what I'm interested. So you think it's harder, for a younger person, it would be harder to find that?
Yeah, because it's a different world out there. I mean, where is there in the world where they don't have mobile phones? I mean, there are odd places, but I mean, it's not, I mean, it's very different. To go to somewhere like Hadramaut, well, Hadramaut is one place, but also like Lamu, to meet children that have never seen television and never seen the stuff that our kids see on television nowadays. You can see it in their faces, a certain purity. Kids are very pure, and they're bombarded with a lot of stuff at a very early age now. And it's a pity. It's so precious what children are born with.
Well, I have to say that your recent project, Meeting with Mountains, I mean, I couldn't bring the book with me on my trip because it's just so big, but it's a fantastic, piece, and I just love looking at those pictures. Even if I don't read the text, just looking at those pictures and imagining, that romantic Islam that you talk about. And as I said in the beginning, I mean, many of those images I had seen before. Many of them I have not, but I grew up as a young, late teenager, early 20s. Those were the images that I wanted to see in the world. That's the Islam I wanted to find.
Yeah.
And there's a danger in that, because sometimes you get attached to images and you project a certain thing. But alhamdulillah, I also feel blessed that I found that. I mean, I feel that I found that, and attached myself to it, and it's life, changing. And I'm so glad that we have record. And I do know Haroon, who I also interviewed for this podcast. He also told me that you're working on a new project.
Yeah, exemplars for our time. Yeah, there was always my idea with meetings with mountains was always that at the end of the book, because I'm not really a writer, and the hardest, taking the pictures was the easiest part of it, but writing the text for it, partly because I do feel that as Muslims we tend to talk in our own language. We talk Arabic terms, and it's a kind of, for someone outside of that world, they do feel they're kind of kept out of it. And I really wanted this book to be accessible. So I'd spend a lot of time trying to find a language that could describe these things without resorting to just kind of Arabic terminology. And that was very important for me. And then I wanted to speak from my own experience. But I always wanted there to be at the back of the book some longer pieces on some of the greater mountains, because what I described was just, a moment in time when I met them and what happened. But some of them have had incredible lives. So the idea was to get some of our current scholars to write pieces about them. But then when I came to put the book together, it was already so big, and I'd cut out quite a lot of it, and it was already like 400 pages. And we just decided it would just be another add-on, and it wouldn't really help the book. So I'd always in my mind thought I wanted to do that as a separate project, where I wouldn't be writing, but we'd find other people who'd spent time with these people who could tell the story in more detail. So that's what we're doing with Exemplars. I'm really excited about it because it's.
When do you anticipate that to roll out?
It's really kind of like a year project, and because of what's been happening, we're a little bit slow getting up started with it. But we've into about 4 of the issues. I think it'll be. I hope at least next summer, inshallah, we'll have the first few issues ready. This is much more challenging visually because there are people that I photographed, like Sheikh Marabat al-Hajj or Sima Nabi, but I photographed them at the end of their lives. And of course, I was asking the son of Sheikh Marabat al-Hajj, are there any other pictures of your father, because I have just pictures of him. And he said, you're the only one. You're the only one who ever photographed him. There was nothing before. And so, these are going to be much more challenging to find images to represent their life, and so we're doing a lot of research, but we're finding stuff, alhamdulillah. So
well, I look forward to that. One of the things I read, this is just, this is a little bit of jumping around, but to go back way to the beginning, that caught my attention is that this was probably back in the rock and roll days, but that you were very interested in gypsies and migrant communities. And you spend, sounds like quite a bit of time actually traveling, photographing them. Is this accurate?
Not a huge amount of time. I used to, when I was photographing what I can call the rock and roll period, my own interests were like nomadic people or tramps. So I did a whole project on street tramps in London. I would just find them and get their permission to photograph them. And then, then I started looking at gypsies. I was interested in gypsies. I went to Ireland and traveled around for a few days, finding gypsies and getting their permission to photograph them. So these were always like projects that I, took on myself. And so I kind of, it was nice doing that exhibition. So I was able to include some of those pictures in the exhibition in Turkey last year. Yeah.
Do you have any plans to publish, a collection of those?
Yeah, the Turks did. The Turks did it was meant to be just a brochure for the exhibition, but they ended up producing a really nice book. This is someone who's hand bound this for me. So, but it's got you know, I really love it because it's got all these incredible pictures from the 60s,
Oh.
and then it's got my own comments and stuff. So it just kind of works its way through, and then
Is there a way to to get a copy of that?
yeah, there's like, so they only did a very short run of it. It was they were meant to print like 2000 or something, and it was just the point when things were changing in Turkey, and you know they lost you know the people that were governing at that time got kind of, you know, it was a change of guard, and so suddenly they had no money, and so I ended up like with about 100 copies of this. So I have a few, I think I have about 70 left, and we keep talking about we're going to put it on the website so people can buy them, because it's really a limited edition book. I hope, inshallah, I can build on it. I'd like to do it as a serious book at some point and add even more stuff to it. But
Okay,
yeah,
I
I have
mean,
a few copies of it. Yeah,
please keep my name in mind. I mean, I'm happy to purchase one. The
yeah,
reason
yeah.
it caught my attention is that when I went to the Hajj, I've only been able to go once. There were many gypsies that sort of were like appeared out of nowhere, and that was the first time. I mean, I've always kind of had an idea, but I became fascinated with them since that experience.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I
So,
mean,
so that's why I'm interested.
nomads are, you know, it's always been part of our culture, you know. I mean, that, you know, going to Twemeret and seeing Sheikh Marabat al-Hajj, just living in tents and small mud buildings, and then even other people who are really remote. We went to another person who, there were just like 3 black tents. That was it, in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's kind of very sobering, and you know, as a Westerner, you think, oh, I got to get out of here. And then once you accept your destiny, it's really fascinating, you know, just to see how they live.
Yeah, I went to Tuamrat once, and we spent the night. I think 2 days and one night, and that's rough living. It's not very not very romantic.
It's tough. I remember we always laugh about this. Sheikh Hamza and I were like, you know, we used to healthy food and stuff, and him and I were going, oh, I need some orange juice or something, and you know, we were like dreaming of fresh glasses of fresh orange juice.
Yeah.
And I said, Sheikh Hamza, I've got a vitamin C tablet in my one of these effervescent tablets, and we broke it in half, and it was like, yeah.
Actually, I remember when we left Tuamrat and then we flew out of Nouakchott to Morocco. The first thing I did when I got to Morocco was like, I need a burger, fries, and a Coke. I don't know. It's the kind of like this reaction, which is not. I can't. It's very tough. It's very tough.
Yeah, it's very hard, and but it's good. You know, it's good for us to see how these people are very strong. You know, incredibly strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Sidi, you talk about your retirement, and you say that the ultimate.
No, I'm not retiring. I mean later years.
Well, or in later years, you say that
Yeah.
the ultimate setup for someone like you is to have an apartment outside of Alhambra and to have a free pass to be able to go inside daily.
To go into where?
Alhambra.
Oh, in Alhambra. Yeah. When we do the workshops. Yeah.
So can you elaborate?
I was still thinking about retirement. Someone said photographers never retire; they just go out of focus. Yeah, no. I mean, the Alhambra is one of the most beautiful places to photograph. You know, and I've been going there since the 70s, and now it's like you have to book up months in advance. But the last few years before the pandemic, we used to take students and do a workshop there. So we rent a hotel very close to the Alhambra, and I do master classes in the morning, and then in the afternoon we take the students in, and they have kind of free range of the area to take pictures, and I'm there to kind of just watch them and, you know, be on hand. And it's just such a beautiful place, you know. It's just, you know, and they say that's a fragment of what, you know, the Muslims created.
Yeah, I mean, I've been blessed to go twice, and it's again one of those things very hard for me to talk about.
Yeah.
It's so overwhelming. It hits all of your senses.
Yeah.
Uh, we went one time, I think it was in spring, and it was the first time I walked in. It was raining, and then the rain subsided, and then the clouds moved, and then the sun came up, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Yeah.
And it's like paradise. I mean, I can't imagine anything. I don't think I've seen anything more beautiful. It's just it's
Yeah.
so complicated. It's just so
Yeah.
intricate and
So beautiful. And I watch these students just transform, just being in that environment and just photographing it and really getting to see it for what it is and the beauty and stuff. It really affects people.
so that's the ultimate. That's the package that we're looking for, Sidi. A flat right across the street and a free pass.
Well, that'd be nice. I mean, always one of my other ones was to be on a beautiful island somewhere and run a juice bar or something. We have a joke in my house that I never do holidays. Like I don't go anywhere unless I can go and take pictures there.
Mm.
And my family get fed up because they like to just have holidays.
Yeah.
So I said, boy, I've never been to the Seychelles or the Maldives or Mauritius. So why don't we plan a trip there? I can take some pictures and then they can all have a holiday.
Yeah. I'm sure there would be beautiful pictures. See, another quote of yours that caught my attention.
Yeah.
You said, I think the silent majority, including myself, have to discover what real Islam is, and above all, we have to be Islam.
Yeah.
And these were comments related to your integration book, which is also another tremendous feat. But that really struck me. We have to be Islam.
Yeah, because, we can't talk about Islam is peace. There was a project that some guys were doing in London where they wanted to do all these signs on the sides of buses saying, Islam is peace. And I was going, they're exploding bombs in London. No one's going to take that serious. We need to be peaceful human beings. We need to be it. You can't, it's the thing that you see about the awliya and the shaykh is they are that thing. They don't say it, they just are it. And you see it and you feel it in them, and it's kind of that disconnect which a lot of people have in modern society. They might aspire to something, but their life is something else. We're not integrated as human beings. So I've always been kind of concerned. I don't kind of tell everybody that I'm a Muslim. I try to keep it quiet. It's a bit difficult because, I've kind of been adopted by the Muslim community, but I like people to discover that later. That's not what I come out as, No one does that in any other religion. If you think of Richard Gere, you don't think Richard Gere is a Buddhist. That's he's an actor who happens to be a Buddhist. And I think, wearing this stuff on, as some of our community do, it's a bit of a problem, And I know their shaykh have said to their students, you shouldn't wear robes and turbans. It does you a disfavor. Because I always feel like as Muslims, we're ambassadors for our religion, and we need to be good ambassadors if we are going to be ambassadors for which is a very beautiful religion. And I still feel that we don't really know what it was at that time, what it was like. I think we have an idea of it, but I think we don't really know it. I think when you're with shaykh and the awliya, you get an inkling of what it's like because you see how they are with other people. But I think, generally as a community, we've kind of, like for instance, take the prayer. I think if we knew how the early people prayed, every time we did the prayer, we would be transformed. Because it isn't just it's got yoga in it and qigong in it and everything. If you ever practice any of those other things, you'll say, oh, that's like qigong, that position in the prayer, that standing, there's just like all those things because it's an ancient wisdom. But we don't know, when Sidi Imam Habib used to pray, when he used to go into sajda, I remember thinking it's like a cloud. his burnous would come down like a cloud.
Mm.
And you go in the mosque, some people go into Sajda, it's like the whole building shakes. And, just to see them, how they pray and how they make dua and all these things. It's real teaching.
All of these decades, being in all of these Muslim countries with all of these people, what for you helped you try to keep that message clear for yourself? I need to be Islam, rather than sort of getting caught up in this whirlwind of
Yeah.
PR and slogans.
Well, I think I was lucky because I traveled a lot, and then each place I would go to, I would see similar things. Okay, this is Morocco, but this is China. The people themselves are different in nature, but the aspects of hospitality and generosity, and these are the things you then can decipher what are the actual, real, true characteristics of Islam, rather than the cultural aspects. Which is why I love the Chinese so much, because they are Muslims, but they are really Chinese. They haven't got rid of their Chinese culture. So that's the next project I'm doing on, which alhamdulillah, Meetings with Mountains took me 50 years to do. I've done my next book, Muslims in China, and basically I put the thing together in 6 weeks during lockdown. So I'm just working on the text now with an editor.
Oh, mashallah, great.
It's called Heaven and Earth and the 10,000 Things.
Nice. Yeah, China.
Sidi Haroon gave that title. I said, as soon as I heard it, I said, yeah, that's it. It's beautiful.
He has a way with words.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Uyghurs is a very fascinating community, and this is a community.
But not just the Uyghurs.
The first century.
But not just the Uyghurs. The thing is there is an idea that they, all the Muslims are Uyghur. The Muslims are right across from one end to the other. And I traveled from Beijing to Kashgar. I was lucky to go before all this current problem. So I went right into Xinjiang and all those areas, Hamian, Turpan and Kashgar and everything. And I met them all and photographed them there. But also the Hui, which are the pure Chinese Muslims, who are different in nature than the Uyghurs, but they're just as amazing, really. When you see the pictures, I'm hoping that the book will do it, because I haven't been there since this current situation. And I was, again, lucky to go in before that happened. And I did 4 trips. The first one in the year 2000. I think the last one was 2015 or something. Or 13, I can't remember. But anyway, it's something that really excites me, because I wanted to go and meet the Chinese and the Russian Muslims from when I first became a Muslim. There's something there that's really fascinating. And then when you hear the story of how Islam went to these places and how they connected, because doing this book, I kept thinking, why was there this synergy between them? Because the Chinese at that time were Confucian and Taoist. But the Muslims at that time were very sophisticated. It was just after the time of the Prophet ﷺ, as the sons of Sahaba or something. So there was this incredible synergy. They talked about the way of the pure, and, the Confucian monks could understand that. They weren't trying to dominate them with the culture. They were just talking about the truth. And there was this incredible synergy. And they were so intelligent, those early Arab travelers. They just built their mosques like the, Taoist and Confucian temples. So people didn't think it was an alien culture. So there was this incredible synergy. To me, it's just such an amazing thing, and I'm really fascinated by it.
Well, maybe after COVID, CD, you can take us on a field trip. I would love to do those cities that you just said. That's a part of the world, unfortunately, I've never been to.
Yeah. Well, we can't go there now. It's very difficult. It's really sad, I'm just hoping the book will just say, look, you can't demonize a whole group of people. They say that the extremists got into Western China and stirred things up because, the Western part of China always wanted autonomy and the government would never give it to them. So I think they went and stirred things up, which was you know, part of the story. But it'll be very difficult to go in this until it gets resolved somehow. Inshallah. They're such beautiful people, really. I met incredible people. Beautiful.
Okay, I can't wait for this book to come out. It sounds like it might be sooner than the...
I hope so, yeah. The text is always a bit of a slow process because I'm working with an editor of mine who's very busy, but we meet every week, and we're going through it, the whole thing. So yeah, and I don't know if you know, Dr. Marata wrote the foreword for it, so I'm very excited about that.
Hey, wow, mashallah, nice.
Yeah, so I'm really honored actually that she did it. So alhamdulillah.
Wow, that's tremendous. I mean, those books are I studied with Sayyid Hussein Nasr at in university
Mashallah.
for 5 years, so
Mashallah.
household names and their books, and William Shiddick and all of these books and stuff like that. So
yeah, I was always inspired by her stuff. Really, I would have liked to have photographed her. I would have stuck her in meetings with mountains if I could, but we've still never met. I mean, we just corresponded, and I asked her, and she very kindly wrote this forward for it. So I'm really quite honored, you know.
Where is she currently based?
I think she's in no, not Washington. She did tell me. I'll look it up because she sent me on the.
Is it New York?
No, I don't think it is.
Okay.
Give me a minute, I can tell you. But keep on talking to me, and I'll find it. I'll find her forward because it's.
So I mean, that's something that I came across in my research in preparation. Some of the photography that you've done for Muslims in China. I did not realize that it's advanced so much to its own project. So I'm very happy. You know, as you know, in the West, unfortunately, one of the problems we have is people think that Muslims are Arabs and Arabs are Muslims, and sort of.
Yeah.
And as an Arab, it's easy to have that bias as well, because that's sort of where my mind is occupied. When I went to Japan for the first time and I met Muslims in Japan, that was really my first exposure to Islam in Asia. And wow, what a tremendous difference than all of the East-West conflict that I'm used to. And so I can imagine Islam in discourse with Buddhism and with Confucian thought and Taoist thought. It must be tremendous because these are very naturally compatible traditions. I mean,
yeah. I went to Japan as well. That was one of my things I did. I really wanted to go and meet the Muslims there, and I did a trip there. I didn't spend enough time there. I would, since I've been there, I'm trying to think when that was. It's early 2000, I think. It's changed. It's grown a lot there. But yeah, I loved going to Japan. Really, it was fascinating for me, and partly because Westerners are very drawn to Buddhism and Zen Buddhism, and I think there's a certain clarity in it that appeals to the Western mind, So I was really interested to see how Japanese interpreted Islam for themselves.
Well, I have some very good contacts in Japan. If you're interested in pursuing,
no, I would love to go again.
It's another favorite place. So I mean, I fell in love with Japan when I went, and I told everyone, I said, look, I am a Japanese Muslim. Okay, I just don't know how to speak Japanese yet, but I'm a Japanese Muslim. It feels just so natural being there. It's tremendous.
Did you go to Kyoto?
I went to Kyoto, yes.
Yeah. So did you meet Fuad Honda?
No.
Oh, you need to know about him. He's a Japanese calligrapher, but
okay.
his calligraphy is in the style of Japanese painting with mountains and oceans. And Fuad Hoshi Honda, his name is.
Okay.
I went to meet him. That was one of my big things. We found out we had the same birthday. He used to be a Zen Buddhist, and then he discovered Islam and Arabic, and he became a Muslim.
MashaAllah. Okay.
Yeah,
next time I go, I would like to be in contact with him.
Yeah, you'd love his work. It's beautiful.
I mean, talk about art. Kyoto is a work of art.
It is. I tell everyone, go to Kyoto. It's so beautiful, that city.
It is.
Sachiko Murata is in Mount Sinai in New York.
Okay. Thought so. Okay, great. Well, Sidi, I don't want to take up more of your time. I mean, we can.
It's fine. I'm fine. It's lockdown. I'm not going anywhere.
Well, so if I can maybe just one sort of a couple questions that are batched together, if we can wrap
Yeah.
up, is just to go back to rock and roll.
Yes.
Uh,
Everything goes back to rock and roll.
Everything goes back to rock and roll, and you know everything in rock and roll goes back to Dylan and the Beatles, which is what I wanted to ask you. I mean, just for purely selfish reasons, did you have any exposure, interactions with Bob Dylan, with the Beatles at that time? Work as a photographer.
You know, all these guys were heroes of mine, which is partly why I got into doing it. The thing was, I was very shy in those days, and the Beatles were already very famous when I started doing photography, and so I kind of got access to nearly everybody else, but they were already too famous. But in those days, if you went to the right places, they were sitting. If you went to the right clubs and stuff, you'd see them sitting over there, and there was a lot of nodding and stuff went on. So we were all part of one kind of, how would you say, one kind of tribe or something. So it was kind of a great time to have been around. Dylan was always one of my heroes, but I mean, I didn't really go to America in those days. I didn't go to America till in the 70s. And so the only time that I did photograph him was after his famous motorcycle accident. He decided to appear at the Isle of Wight. And that's when he did that famous with the band in the white suit and everything, and I photographed him then, so at least I did get to photograph him.
Yeah, it's something about those songs, those protest songs, and the times they are changing, the answers flowing in the way. I mean, that's something, it's still, when I listen to it, it really strikes a chord.
Absolutely. Yeah, and he says that they were for a particular time, but I mean, they were incredible. I mean, incredible poetry and songs and very visual, I think if his voice had been all very different, it would have clouded, you wouldn't have actually just been able to hear what his lyrics, they just conjure up these visual things, it's just amazing.
So did you also know Cat Stevens at that time?
I knew about, the trouble was in the 60s, there was so much music around that I was aware of him, but I wasn't that kind of connected to him. I really kind of connected to him later, and we connected as Muslims, and we traveled together. We went to Sudan together and stuff. So I did things with him, and I've got to know him, and he's a very sincere guy. I have a huge respect for him. I think it was just that the music period was a very encapsulated time for me, and I suddenly had access to a lot of people. I was with the Doors for a week, and it's just kind of ridiculous, that I did that. I'm kind of rediscovering all that stuff. I mean, it's kind of funny. And I've been I've been a bit careless with all that stuff, and I've had kind of stuff stolen from me and stuff. But someone sent me some contacts the other day and said, "Are these yours?" And I looked at them and I said, "They're, yeah." And I realized that I photographed David Bowie at some point, and I thought I didn't have pictures of him. Yeah. So I'm on the trail to try and retrack down.
Any Hendrix stories?
Yeah, well, I mean, Hendrix is very important because I wanted to go to India, and I didn't have the money, and I thought, well, I'll wait till I get the money, and I was asked if I wanted to go on tour with the Rolling Stones, and in Europe they were going on tour for 3 months, and I thought about it. I mean, Brian Jones had just died, and they were quite heavy into drugs at that time, and I thought, I'm not sure I want to be locked up in hotel rooms, because those days you just kind of live with the guys and just hang out with them, and I just thought, I'm not sure I want to put myself in that situation. I was going through this change of wanting to go on a spiritual path, so I kind of turned it down, and I had photographed them before anyway. And then I got a message that Jimi Hendrix was playing at the Isle of Wight, and so I thought, oh, okay, I've never really photographed Jimmy. I'll go down. So I went to the Isle of Wight, and he did this incredible concert, and I photographed it. And 2 weeks later, he died. So I had some of the last pictures of him performing, and I knew the guys that ran his label, and I showed them the pictures, and they just said, "We'll buy them from you." So I, stupidly, or not stupidly, I wanted, I sold them all the color stuff and the black and white stuff, and got the money I needed to go to India. What was nice was that sometime later I discovered like a couple of strips of the black and white stuff from that concert that somehow I'd forgotten about. I didn't give them or something. I didn't do it intentionally, but so I do have some pictures of Jimmy and the other way.
I mean, that's to be a fly on the wall with those, those concerts. I mean, I think that decade still is impacting us today.
Yeah.
Statistically, and those messages, and very often. I mean, even though All Along the Watchtower is a Dylan song, but Hendrix made it famous. Everybody covers that song, even till today. Everyone's got a cover.
Yeah. No, Hendrix's version is very different, and it's brilliant. I mean, I had fortune to meet him. I was staying in Montague Square with a friend of mine, and he said to me, "Do you want to go and meet Hendrix? Go and have a cup of tea with him?" And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, he's just living over the road in Ringo Starr's flat or something." I said, "Okay." To show how much of a deal this was, I didn't even take a camera with me. Wow. Right? We went over there and we chatted with him. We had a cup of tea together, and he was really nice. He's so humble, very quiet guy. Very different to his stage persona. And I just think, if you had a bit more courage, you would have taken a camera and just like, you know what I mean? It's just like, I was always so shy about. Anyway, alhamdulillah, things are what they are.
I mean, see, that's definitely something to think about, some kind of project with that.
I want to do something. I mean, I'm kind of working, whenever I get a minute, I'm working on my old negatives. They're quite, they're old. They're like 50 years old, more than 50 years old.
There's a great Ken Burns documentary on the Vietnam War.
Uh-huh.
It's very long. It's like 10 episodes. Each one's like an hour and a half.
Yeah, I've heard about it. I've never seen it, yeah.
I saw it during this last Ramadan.
Okay.
And it was really the only time I've actually understood Vietnam. I mean, what a colossal mess. But seeing that and understanding the war, I understand sort of where this movement, this cultural movement.
Yeah.
Of course, after World War II in Europe, but there's just a lot of other stuff, racial issues.
We're also aware of Vietnam. I mean, I talked about that in the exhibition book, Searching for Light, that we were aware of what was happening in America and Cuba and all these things. It really made peace such a big issue. And I think we are at a similar point now, particularly with the youth, and they're leading the ecology movement, and they just want a much simpler thing. This has gone on for too long. Look at the world and the state of the world. It can continue like this. And so I think it's a very similar time in some ways, and maybe the pandemic is part of the picture to make people just kind of reflect a little bit about what's happening and what we're doing.
When the pandemic started and I had to address my local community, I thought of this verse in the Quran, وَلَنُذِيقَنَّهُم مِّنْ عَذَابٍ أَدْنَى دُونَ الْعَذَابِ الْأَكْبَرِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. We'll have them taste the smaller punishment rather than the bigger punishment. Maybe they will come back.
Yeah.
And this whole, quarantine, that's what I've been thinking about. Allah's giving us an opportunity to come back, to come back to our senses, to come back to morality, to come back to, our true selves. And the music of your generation, I love that music too. It motivates me. I think it's speaking about that, but just in another, using another mode of expression.
Yeah. I mean, these were as I relate it to it's like the Jahiliyyah time, the poets of the Jahiliyyah time, because I said that, at those times people look towards the poets for kind of trying to work out what's happening. And I think Dylan was very instrumental in that. And then there were photographers that I really respect who documented Vietnam and Cambodia. And, you know, they feel, particularly Don McCullen, he feels like he never achieved anything, you know, although he put himself at great risk and went into all these situations. But I did say to him in a letter, you think that you didn't achieve anything, but you actually made people of my generation aware of actually what was going on there. Because without those photographers, we would never have known what was really happening in those situations.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's true. That's true. And that's actually in the documentary, that's one of the things that they talk about heavily, the power of the journalists and the photographers that were bringing
Yes.
back, you know, the famous picture of the, you know, the girl running naked, you know, being burned by the
Yes,
bomb. And, you know, these things are very iconic of the war,
absolutely.
how ridiculous the war was and pointless
Yeah.
and destruction. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Very, very important. And people need to really look at it and understand it. I think I felt for a long time the music kind of clouded over a lot of the other stuff, which is why I was kind of quite keen to do a project that included the culture and all these kind of ideas. And I sort of broached it a little bit in this book and talked about, you know, some of the things that were started in the 60s, you know, even things like healthy eating and ecology, you know, feminism, all these kind of ideas, peace movement, you know, all these things began then, and then they kind of, people kind of forgot about them a bit, and then these ideas come back again when people remember that they are important things to kind of identify with. So I do feel that that's kind of, there is a lot of that going on at the moment. So inshallah, give peace a chance.
Yes, give peace a chance. Sidi, could you maybe close us out with, you know, maybe a thought or a piece of advice, you know, something to leave us with? I mean, this is.
Yes, I just thought of something. So I lived and grew up in Notting Hill Gate, and it was a you know, it's when I first started doing photography, and so I was always wandering around with my camera in my hand looking for stuff, and I'm gonna find this shot. Okay. So I was wandering around, and there was a whole street that it was a kind of derelict area, and they painted one whole street black, I think they were going to make a film there. And someone had come along and graffitied on the wall. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Can you read it?
We teach all hearts to break.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that kind of thing has stayed in my heart, because it's like the essence of Sufism. It's kind of, it's a very spiritual thing, you know. Like if you're a lover, you're going to break your heart, you know, because this is like, yeah. So when I saw this,
it's very powerful.
Yeah, and it's kind of stayed with me, because it just, anyway, it's the spiritual path is beautiful and amazing and full of wonder, but it's a journey, you know, and you have to embark on it.
And you have to,
you know, they say the path is Allah. He's not at the end of the path. He is Allah, you know.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's a very poetic and artistic way to end. I couldn't have done it better, you know. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed talking to you. We should talk more. It's really interesting. You've got interesting take on things, and it's you know, I said to you, I'm not very scholarly, but it's interesting to meet scholars that do think about, you know, they use their gift that they've been given to kind of help decipher, because we need scholars to decipher the wisdom that's contained in.
I mean, you know, the scholarly stuff, to be honest, is boring. It's very dry, and, you know, teaching Islamic law. I mean, I enjoy it, but it's a dry thing. But I'm much more interested in what Islam produced in the past. Like, why are we the way we are today? Like, why can't we
Yes.
build like things like Alhambra? Like, why haven't
Yeah.
Muslims in London built, like a Muslim quarter of London that's just like,
Yeah. Yeah. I've always had dreams to do all these things, and it hasn't happened. But inshallah, well, I meet a lot of young people. They're really inspiring, and I'm very pleased that a lot of young people have bought Meetings of Mountains. And I think it's because you can read about the awliya, but when you actually see them and see their humanity, it's a different thing. I think coming from India, I had an idea that they're very charismatic and they fly through the air on carpets and stuff. And then when you meet them, they're just so real and very human. And I know you want to finish, but I used to always go to the Peace Forum in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, to take pictures because I love Sheikh bin Bayah. And I used to say to them, look, I just want to photograph Sheikh bin Bayah. I'm not really interested in anybody else. Because his face is so beautiful. And then they sent me an invite to attend it virtually. And I said, oh, do you want me to take pictures virtually as well? I'm getting quite good at the screen grab. But I listened to his talk. I don't know if you heard it. They call it the work frame or something for this year's conference. But he quoted us a hadith that I'd never heard. I'm sure you've heard it. I had never heard it before. And it's the analogy of that all of us in the world today are in a boat.
The top compartment and the low compartment.
Yeah. So this thing, I never heard that before, but it just was such a strong visual image for me. And and the way he explained it in a very simple way about how, the people in the bottom want to bore a hole to get the water. And it was just like such an analogy or mithal for today where we're at, that it stayed with me for days. And that's his gift. He is an incredible scholar, and he was able to put that together that even I could get something really profound from it. And
that's a very important concept, because a lot of times Muslims, they think that it's us and them.
Yes, and he made that very clear, that we're on a shared journey.
But this is the world's culture. The things that we've been talking about, rock and roll and poetry. This is all of we've inherited this culture. It belongs to all of us. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, that hikmah is the lost property of the believer. If you find it, it's yours. If you find it in Japan, it's yours. If you find it in rock and roll, it's yours. If you find it in art, it's yours.
Yeah.
So I find that very liberating.
Yeah, me too.
Because before I came to study Islam, I was an actor in college and a singer, and I had at one point, very small time, I wanted to become an opera singer, and I was in opera. So what's wrong with that? Allah put those inclinations in me, and I benefited from. I learned from them. Alhamdulillah, I didn't become a professional actor. My parents were going to kill me when I told them that. But I think that this idea that the world's wisdom is ours.
Yeah.
It's not like mine and yours, but it's all of us together. I find that very
exactly. And we need one another to know the whole picture.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So inshallah, we can continue to inspire the next generation. I think Islam is beautiful, and as you do as well. And if we believe Islam is beautiful, it should make us beautiful.
Yes, exactly.
And that's why that quote that I read back to, your own quote about being Islam, it touches me so much, because I think that's what we need to do. That's the real work.
Exactly.
It's not about slogans and conferences, but we need to be that art of Islam, that beauty of Islam.
Exactly.
And everything else will follow.
It's so important, really. I knew even before I became a Muslim, sometimes you would see somebody who just stood out from the crowd, whose face was full of light. I didn't know what that was. What was it? I didn't understand what it was. All I knew was that person had something that I was attracted to.
We'll keep producing these books, Sidi. We need
Inshallah.
we need these
Inshallah.
books. We need these books.
It's kind of they're labors of love, but I think if they help, inshallah.
Well, Allah give you tawfiq, inshallah.
Ameen, inshallah.
Again, thank you so much, sincerely, for your time.
Pleasure. Do you ever come to London?
Frequently.
Oh, come on. I'll give you a copy of the book.
Anglophile.
Call me.
Next
time you come, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at this rate, probably won't be till the summer.
Yeah. But when you come and see us, okay?
I will definitely let you know. How far are you from the city?
I'm at the end of the Metropolitan line.
Ah.
It's about 35 minutes on the Underground.
Okay, excellent. Excellent.
It's nice. It's green here. It's the furthest place that the Underground goes to. They say the original directors that built the Underground service lived out here. That's why they ran the Metropolitan.
Okay, that's good.
I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I was told anyway.
Then we have an appointment to meet in London.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. Good. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. It was very pleasurable.
Assalamu alaikum.
Take care. Assalamu alaikum.